Welcome to 1+1. I'm Rosie Batty. Hannah Gadsby's iconic stand-up show Nanette, filmed here at the Opera House, was a game changer for comedy. Hannah's exploration of sexism, homophobia, and the nature of trauma touched a collective nerve. I wanted to find out how she got to Nanette and where she's going next. Hannah Gadsby, welcome to 1+1.
Two. I just had to do the math and it just came out. It is two.
It is two, you're right, Hannah.
There you go, Dad.
We've got to rename the show. We're here at the Opera House, where you filmed your comedy spectacular, or special, should I say.
Look, yeah, special, call it, it was special. The technical term is a special, but I do like spectacular.
It was fairly spectacular.
Thank you.
Thank you. Might have peaked a bit early, but...
I watched Nanette recently and I can't tell you how moved I was. It had an enormous impact on me and I still have a lot of feelings about it. And for people who don't understand the mechanics of comedy, like myself, what was so unusual about Nanette?
She wasn't deliberately funny. To give us some context for the show, as I wrote it, it was as part of my career pre-Netflix. So it was a conversation I'd been having with my own audience that I'd built throughout the decade of my career, and they understood me to be a certain kind of comedian who had these stories. I talked a lot about my childhood and was self-deprecating, and I was talking to that audience when I wrote the show. And to that audience, I wrote a show that was in the first half quite funny and in my normal manner, and then the second half, I pulled the rug out from under them and told a few home truths, which were quite traumatic and ultimately very triggering subject matters, and defiantly not funny. I left the stage, leaving the audience without a laugh. Quite profound not laugh.
And he came back and he said, "Oh, no, I get it. You're a lady faggot. I'm allowed to beat the shit out of yous." And he did. He beat the shit out of me and nobody stopped him.
As painful and as raw as it was, I loved how you made me feel. And you've talked about anger, and I've spent a lifetime ashamed of my anger and trying to keep a lid on it. And I just loved the fact that you just have allowed that anger to run through and just be channeled.
Yeah, I was really angry. It was a very urgent piece that I was writing, and I wasn't very well. My mental health was really being pounded, and I was struggling to keep my head above water. And that anger, I think, is what kept me afloat. I sort of said in the show that, you know, anger is never constructive, but I do believe it's a lifeboat. When you're sort of drowning and alone, I think anger can be a little motorboat. To this day, it surprises me and humbles me that it connected with so many different types of people, because ultimately I wrote it to sort of push people away. I felt like I'd found myself to have quite a broad audience. And I'd write my shows and I'd walk on stage and I don't know who these people are or how I fit in with my own audience. They seemed very, very genuinely pleased to see me, and I appreciated that. But it got to the stage where I didn't know what to write or what to say, because I didn't know who I was talking to and what they thought of me and what they expected of me. And that mirrored very much my experience in life, where I was always forever trying to be what people expected me to be and just failing at that and being punished for that. And so it was, you know, that sort of melting pot of difficulty that drove that.
Well, it's how we like to test people to see whether they're there for the long haul, and clearly you have a really an audience or a following of people that really do want to feel, do want to learn, do want to be part of your journey.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also, though, is that I didn't understand that I could do this, but I tapped into a place where other people were having similar feelings for very different reasons. Like, I thought that I would just corner myself off with my little queer audience and we'd be fine. But, you know, I guess there was a universality that other people found room for themselves in, and that I didn't understand that was something I was capable of doing.
Yeah. And for many people, Nanette is what you're famous for, but your new book, 10 Steps to Nanette, is your journey before. What has brought you to wanting to share that part?
Being on the autistic, you know, spectrum, ASD, means that it's very difficult for me to communicate. Often the best way I communicate is the finished product. The creative process that happens before it can be infuriatingly isolating.
Yeah.
But my reasons for writing the book, honestly, was, you know, I signed the book deal well before Nanette was a thing.
Long ago.
I was one of the... It's 10 years ago, I reckon.
Well, they've been very patient publishers, haven't they?
Very patient. I think they got away with it. You know, publishers probably wouldn't like me putting that out there. The deadlines are really just...
Negotiable.
Not even that, to be ignored. I always thought that I had a nice story to tell, like just a little skip through childhood. I always enjoyed reading funny stories about people's childhoods. I like the way that those stories, you know, once someone is older and has some distance from the shadow of their childhood, I enjoy reading those books where people, you know, think about, you know, try and match who they are with who they used to be. So that was what I thought I was doing, and then sort of everything, my life changed, and so I had to incorporate that. I guess that was the end of the answer.
So I guess I start my next question.
You can, I believe it's the right place.
So in your book, in your life story, you grew up in rural Tasmania.
I like that you can say rural, because that is a word that I can't. If you just saw
Rural?
Rural.
Rural.
Like, I sound like a car that won't turn over.
Yeah, either that or a dog that's about to bark or something.
Rural. You'd have to tap the starter motor for that. I say regional.
Regional.
To get around it. Small town. Yes. Say rural again?
Rural.
Beautiful. Yes, I'm from rural Tasmania. When I was growing up, and particularly in the early part of my career, Tasmania was always thought of as a joke. But it's growing up now. But also, I think anyone who grows up on an island understands it's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
On small islands, there is a particular intensity and a claustrophobia and also deeper connections that happen in communities. And I think my story sort of explores both the good side of that and the difficult.
Yeah. In your book, your adolescence is punctuated by what's happening in Tasmania throughout your childhood when it was illegal to be gay. And I couldn't believe that. I mean, I've been in Australia since 1986-ish. It was illegal to be gay until 1997. And I find, you know, when I think of that, I think that seems incredulous and horrific.
Well, I think, first of all, it wasn't illegal to be gay. It was illegal to behave, like do the homosexual acts.
There, yeah.
Which is a complex idea in itself. But it was the debate around it that made it remarkable, or is what imprinted my life. Because if they'd have just changed the laws, I perhaps might not have known, you know, that there was this fierce. That there was this law and it could have impacted on the way people see me and the way I live my life. But it was the debate and the way that it was handled and the way that those that were against changing the laws conducted themselves and the way that they spoke, the dehumanising language and the vitriol and just the way that they did not care about the humans that those laws impacted. That is what is the most striking part about that. It's not that it was so late to change. We're all busy. There are a lot of dumb laws that were written a long time ago that have no relevance to us now, and we really do need to pick through these and work out how, because our communities and our societies are always changing and increasingly more so, and it's complex. But we need to work out a better way to have these discussions, that always humanises those that it impacts. I just feel like people need to be more careful.
And kind. And you moved to the mainland to study in your early 20s, which was followed by a really difficult period in your life. And you've called that your wilderness years. But you haven't talked about that in your book. And you say you want the world to stop demanding gratuitous details. What do you mean by that?
I think when it comes to trauma or, people don't like the bad feelings that come with knowing that something really bad has happened. And often what that translates into is a desire to make sure that they're not to blame. And what then that means is they want to know details so that almost as an alibi for their own guilt. What were you doing? Or why did you make these choices? It is part of the victim blaming narrative. And ultimately, I just want to get to the point, it's like, I had a terrible time. I was nearly, shuffled off the earth. I was traumatized and I went through extraordinary amount of pain and isolation, and I almost didn't get to the other side of it. That should be enough for the world to go, oh, mate, sorry about that. Like, I just feel like that should be enough, instead of like, well, what did you do to deserve this? Why did you make these decisions? We're always looking for to issue blame or responsibility. And that's not often what victims are looking for. They're really, honestly looking to feel safe, and being interrogated for details is really not how you find safety.
Why is your entry into comedy such a complex thing to explain?
Because it came out of that time.
Right.
And I know what people are looking for. They're looking for my desire to succeed, which simply didn't exist. I was just trying to survive. And it was just another thing I decided to do. And there was no reason why it would have worked out any better than all the other disasters that have preceded it. And it didn't happen like in a comfortable sequence of events. I just wanted to impress upon people that I was lost.
You were diagnosed with autism in 2016. Had you ever entertained the possibility you were on the autism spectrum?
No, because, I was busy, and also, what we understand autism to be, it's changing now, but for most of my life, it was just boys who knew a lot, could count cards. It's just it isn't what we've been led to believe it is. And so you don't understand. I didn't understand myself as others people saw me either. So that makes it quite difficult.
I was going to say, has that altered anything for you within your family? Were they surprised? Has it mattered at all?
I think it's helped us all sort of navigate a bit of my weirdness. I think Mum felt a little guilt, which I don't believe she deserves to feel. Like, there's no one to blame for this. But, you know, there is a difficulty that comes with being on the spectrum, and just in the last few years it has been nice to see that slowly more and more people on the spectrum get to speak for themselves.
Nanette was released at the height of the Me Too movement. Did you feel that that was contributed to its success? The timing was good?
I think the Me Too moment definitely contributed to Nanette's success after a certain point. I think the show was written before it and outside of that whole world. And also the Me Too moment has sort of seemed to consolidate around a world I'm now part of but wasn't at the time of writing Nanette, and that sort of, you know, the Hollywood sort of idea. But I wrote Nanette before that, and it wasn't a part of that, but it was certainly written in the same zeitgeist. And certainly, you know, it's hard to believe that perhaps Netflix would have perhaps wanted something like Nanette if it didn't have a moment, you know, like the Me Too. But I don't understand why people make decisions, so that's a guess. But it seems like a good guess that, you know, the momentum of that moment sort of
Contributed.
Brought me along with it, yeah.
Nanette was criticised for breaking the rules of comedy. So what rules are those unspoken rules that we don't know about that you have broken?
Well, I fiddled around with a lot of the mechanics of comedy. The whole show itself was built around one of my favourite tools, and that's the callback. I love callbacks in comedy, and basically what that is, you know, later on in the show you will reference a joke that you made earlier or an idea, and just being like a link of nostalgia, you get an easy laugh. They're like, oh, remember that time I laughed at that thing before? Now you said it again, I'll laugh again. Oh, good times. I really love that as a tool, and I'd always been using it in my comedy, and it was getting more sophisticated as I got better at my craft. And in Nanette, I built it around that callback premise. And early in the show, I talk about, I tell a funny story about, you know, being mistaken for a gay man by a man who thought I was hitting on his girlfriend. And so very deliberately built that up to be a funny story. And not certainly a big moment in the show, but when I called back to it, and at a time in the show where ordinarily, if I was not breaking the rules of comedy, I would have made it funnier, you know, built on the laughs that I'd earned earlier, called back and raised the bar. But instead, I bent it backwards and broke it because I called back but removed the laughs. I peeled back layers of the story that revealed that it was, you know, I was victim of a hate crime and beaten. And I let the audience sit in that and feel, you know, complicit in what had happened to me and for laughing at what had happened to me. And ultimately what I was trying to do was disconnect the audience from each other, because for me, that's what a callback did, was to connect people. They can connect me in a room because it's like a shared joke, and there's nothing better than a shared grope. Shared grope. Gosh, paging Dr. Freud. But a shared joke, because, you know, when you're with, you know, friends that you've known for years, and someone can just say a word and everyone's laughing because the joke is built in the minds, the shared minds, and that's what a callback for me does. In a room full of strangers, you craft intimacy by going, we shared a moment earlier, and then so you become a team. And in Nanette, I refused to allow that, and I disconnected the audience from each other and made them sit in that tension with their critical faculties in place. And so I wanted to artificially create that shape. You know, people came into my show particularly in the beginning, going, this is Hannah Gadsby. We like her work. We trust her work. So there's a transaction of trust to begin with. And I did what I always do, and it's like, you know, there are the jokes. Yes, we like these jokes. Those jokes we like Hannah doing. There they are. And so I built that trust, and then I took it away, and I didn't give it back, because that is what trauma is. I mean, then they get to leave. They're fine. They're not still there.
Yep, they're not still trapped in. You let them out.
Yeah, it still was. It wasn't real trauma.
No.
One of my biggest concerns, though, is that the material that I was using is really triggering for a lot of people, and to be able to do that show without compounding, you know, the difficulty people have in those subjects, you know. So simultaneously trying to create a safe space for people who've lived through similar traumas, at the same time of forcing people who have the privilege of ignoring those traumas and not caring about the effects of that kind of trauma, to challenge those people to experience that discomfort.
I'm not sure how many times you actually performed Nanette, Hannah. Do you know how many times?
200 odd? 203.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that? Because I know from the degree of speaking I've done, and when I was Australian of the Year, I did 250 speaking engagements within that year alone. I didn't realise how much it was re-traumatising me and how much I was giving of myself. And I did it because I felt it was so important to be speaking out. When you give so much in each performance, what was it doing to you?
Well, I feel like I had one advantage over you in that I had experience in public speaking, and I was in control of the space that I was performing the show in. And I knew fairly early on that it was going to be a constant re-traumatising experience, and it was. There were times on stage that I really struggled to contain my physical distress. Other times I felt quite powerful in it. You know, it really was a journey, and no two shows were the same. And one of the things that really kept me was the quality of the silence that some of moments in the show elicited in a room. And it was tangible, and it was thick, and I was both in control of it and not. And I felt connected to the world in a way that I'd never managed to do before.
I just needed my story heard, my story felt and understood by individuals with minds of their own. Because like it or not, your story is my story. And my story is your story.
People hold strong opinions about you, and you're elevated into a leadership position. People with disability, people, survivors of violence, the LGBTIQ plus community. How do you manage that?
Probably not particularly well, but the way I approach it is that I cannot be responsible for other people's voices or experiences. The best I can do is my best, and that is to be honest about my own experiences. And ultimately what I'd like to do is not, you know, be remembered for what I've done here, but shown a way for other people to find their voice. Like, I think a lot of the way you get out of a difficult, oppressive time in your life is with your voice and through being heard, and I can't do that on behalf of people. I think a lot of people can, you know, and have taken solace in what I've done, and it's, you know, perhaps given them a bit of strength, but ultimately it's just witnessing someone else being able to speak.
There were so many powerful things that you said in Nanette that they were just like, I could relate to them so much, and I just wanted to write them all down. But something that was really powerful for me was when you said there's nothing stronger than a broken woman who's rebuilt herself. Is that how you see yourself now?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, look, I didn't understand it at the time, but I was rebuilding myself on stage in front of people. So when I said that, it was like I was thinking of, you know, my mum and my grandmothers and, you know, people I've known who've been through incredible difficulty and still managed to maintain themselves, rebuild themselves, and have dignity as constructive life forces. And I did not count myself amongst that when I wrote that line, but as I performed it and as I, you know, stepped up to the moment I'd created for myself, I guess that's what I was doing. And so I do feel, not as strong as a diamond, but pretty robust.
I look forward to seeing what you do next, Hannah Gadsby, and thank you for joining me on 1+1.